to our MindWare lunchtime webinar series, our MindWare Moments. Myself and Veronica are excited to introduce Christopher Wright. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, nice to see you both this morning.
It's great to see you for our lunch break. So just a refresher that these MindWare Moments are really a live webinar series designed specifically for GPs and health professionals, hosted by myself and Veronica McEwen from MindWare Psychology, and interviewing some of our awesome team members here at MindWare Psychology. Each session offers interactive conversations based on discussion on evidence-based insights into key areas of mental health. And they're featuring psychologists like Chris today that will talk about themselves and some of the areas that they work in. So for Chris today, Chris is going to focus on understanding how to support clients navigating trauma, neurodiversity, and identifying using EMDR, Schema Therapy and ACT. So a little bit about Chris. Chris has completed his Masters of Psychology, Masters of Provisional Psychology, his M-Psych Honours and Bachelor of Psychology. Chris is a general psychologist and clinical registrar. He has deep-rooted connection into the community that he supports. He has an understanding of values and the challenges and the culture of the area, allowing him to personalise care for his clients. He utilises evidence-based treatments such as cognitive behaviour therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, schema therapy, eye movement desensitisation or EMDR. Chris is dedicated to providing a flexible experience as needed in the treatment. He is passionate in working with clients experiencing distress related to neurodiversity, trauma, depression, anxiety, developmental and identity. He strives to provide an empathetic, welcoming atmosphere for everybody, enhancing outcomes through helping clients to feel heard, understood, and supported. And we're really excited today to really hear about Chris focusing on the area of navigating that trauma and neurodiversity with EMDR, Schema Therapy and ACT. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you for that, Tanya. Yep, that's me. Almost finished the registrar program, almost.
Nearly there. Congratulations. How long you got to go?
Hopefully by the end of the month, it'll be far away.
Woohoo! Well, that's wonderful. It is such a long pathway, and Chris has been working in this area for a while, and so it's a great celebration. It's up to 8 years of training to get our endorsements. So good on you, Chris. So I'll hand it over to Veronica, who will kick off, and we'll start to dig into, I guess, your area of interest, Chris, and what you're presenting for us today. So thank you.
Chris, out of curiosity, and this is where I always love to start, my first question, and it's always a non-prepared one, is tell me, why did you get into psychology? What was your motivation?
Well, there's a few things, right? I met a really good one. I should just start there, right? I guess. I met a good one that I really meshed well with, who was a bit different, may I say. And then they introduced me to this movie, the Good Will Hunting movie.
Oh, yeah.
Matt Damon, Robin Williams. I loved it. I know it's not the actual orthodox kind of thing that we do, but it really made me actually fall in love just with the idea of that being that right person, I guess, for people in their really vulnerable or in their tough times, I think is just something that I don't know, really stood out to me, I should say. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, you touched on such an important thing there, isn't it? Is that it's something I guess we as psychologists value too, is that the importance of that individual connectedness that clients experience with practitioners and the importance of that rapport development, hey?
And I think that kind of will stem into some of the stuff I've got to talk about today as well. Definitely.
Yeah,
Okay.
great.
Yeah, let's kick it off.
Yeah.
Let's kick it off and hear a little bit about, so can I start by maybe asking, like, we talk a lot about trauma, I suppose, that a lot of neurodiverse individuals experience, and that it's often a little bit different than it is for clients that don't have the diversity aspect. So I'm just wondering, can you explain maybe some of that difference or why there is trauma in neurodiverse clients?
Yeah, it's a really complicated one actually, right? Because I guess trauma by nature is those times when something happens in a person's life and for any number of reasons it doesn't really get processed properly or adaptively, right? And then we kind of have that leftover like wound per se. And then when we sort of bring in, I guess, neurodiversity into the picture a little bit, things like like in ADHD, maybe people feel feelings really strongly or maybe quicker as well. And then maybe like with ASD, things maybe take just a little bit longer to process or differently even. It can mean that there might be more blocks or higher likelihood maybe that things don't really get processed adaptively. So it's a bit of a mix, right? You've got this thing where we all can experience these things. So in some ways, it's really no different for those with neurodiversity. But then how they express it or when triggers come up, they may not maybe attribute it to different, or it can just be different in so many different ways.
So you're probably talking about a very important differentiation that we as psychologists probably just take a bit for granted, don't we? Is that idea of little T's versus big T's. So those little traumas versus the what we see, I guess, is those big intense traumas.
Yes, and
Do you think people with autism and neurodiversity or ADHD, they're kind of more vulnerable to traumatic experiences?
I definitely think so with regards to how much change or motion there is kind of in the world around them as well, where these they some people really strive with routine and schedule and things doing the same and things being similar. In fact, they far exceed so many people as well when that's the case. But in this world we live in at the moment with so much change sort of flying around them all the time, then no, that's very much makes them more vulnerable to this.
So you're talking about those little things that other people can kind of just roll with sometimes become what we call those little T's, those little traumas.
Yeah, exactly.
Cumulatively kind of have that bigger trauma impact.
And then that sort of leads then into that developmental sense of identity and sense of self, right, as well, where they can be this rolling along little T's here and there. And then they get to adulthood and it's like, what sort of, other people might not really be able to connect, like what has happened for this person.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There's some great things to consider there with that trauma. I guess though, as you touched on earlier too, there's I suppose we're all people living in the world and we're all going to have different experiences. So they're just as likely as anybody else to have those big T traumas too, aren't they? So we can have that post-traumatic stress that's just sitting there independent of the ASD as well, I would imagine.
I think I've been when I first started working a lot with neurodiversity and things like that, I hadn't even really done my trauma training yet much out of uni because I don't do too much in uni. So I had to go and get some extra stuff. But it has been very surprising to me how valuable and relevant some of that trauma training and extra stuff I did has been, particularly for my neurodiverse clients. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. I think you mentioned something earlier too about touching on identity. And I know that is such a challenge for people with ASD, isn't it? So I'm wondering, can you speak a little bit to some of those challenges that you see in therapy around identity development and I guess even that idea of emotional kind of safety in that therapy space, particularly for ASD clients?
Well, a few of the models that I work around are really big on notions of identity development and such like that. So starting with what kind of is the natural or kind of how we'd hope it to go is that when a person is experiencing life growing up, that the way in which other people respond to us or interact with us kind of then is how we develop what our sense of self actually is. It's about how other people in the world or animals or whatever it is, how everything else responds to us and then interacts with us. But then there might be some pitfalls here or some different pathways where maybe, like the tribe or the group that people connect with or don't connect with might get a bit mixed, I guess, or might not really quite go to plan. And some neurodiverse factors might be why that might be a little bit different or a bit tricky for these people.
And do you
Yeah.
see when you talk about that tribe, Chris, or I certainly hear that language a bit about finding your tribe or connecting with the tribe? And so how does that work with therapy? Like when we're talking to them about, with neurodiverse people around finding that tribe and the importance of that, or how challenging that can be. How do you incorporate that into therapy?
Oh, well, it's incredibly hard sometimes to make that shift because they've kind of had this reoccurring small t experience of maybe they don't have one or maybe they can't find one. So it's a lot of that's why I stem to, ACT, which is very, values, person-centered. These are the great things you have as a person, and use that to motivate them to make this uncomfortable shift to find that tribe in different places. That's why, I mean, me myself, I've spent so much time online growing up because I found it really hard to find my tribe, as an example, in different places. So it can be, you got to get really clever and out of the box thinking with some of this. Everyone's different, whether it be, D&D nights or, gaming online or forum posting or even things that they might not be super comfortable with, but maybe they've got people with a similar, I don't know, similar way their mind works. But yeah, everyone, but it's workable. It's all doable.
I really, when you were talking about that too, you were talking about the online world and how that became a tribe for you. Like, I guess that has been your experience compared to my generation, for example. And I've seen you in a therapy rooms where you very much utilize that online and offline tools. Like, do you want to talk a bit about how you engage that with your therapy?
Well, I guess the most important part is it's always interesting having conversations with parents or guardians and things like that about tech use and sort of social aspects as well. I'm always like, straight in the door. All right, what games you playing? All right, I can sort of make some connections in my mind without saying them out loud about, okay, they're playing this. What are the social aspects? What's the time aspects? What's the focus? What's the inattention? What's the sleep? All of these things. And I guess hopefully I can give a more productive perspective or a different bit of a shift, I guess, for parents, I guess, as well as to what the possible benefits, I guess, socially and all that tribe type stuff might look like for the young people. Yeah.
Chris, can I just go back to you were talking before about that sense of self-development and how that's a normal process of adolescent development and human development. Can I ask your opinion? Like, do you think there is a difference for young people whether whether they've already been diagnosed with neurodiversity or not to how that's impacted in that sense of self-development?
Geez, that's a good question, Veronica, I reckon. Because obviously I've met people at different stages of when like a diagnosis or something like that is talked about, right? Like I've met many young people where immediately my mind's like, yep, I can sort of tell there's a bit of differences, some quirkiness there going on. And I suppose, fortunately enough, I haven't seen it, in my perspective, drastically negatively impact, I guess, that in young people in this current state of things, which is always very, I feel that that's good for me to see. Um, it's kind of, no, I don't know. I think I'll
I
have to
think it's
think.
like if you're coming at it from a neuroaffirming type of perspective. So when you're talking about it hasn't impacted them too much, do you think that's because you do come from that strength-based framework though, when you're kind of seeing whether they're diagnosed or not, you're looking at how you fit into their group and help them find their tribes. I wonder, if you're conceptualizing it outside of the space and the struggles that could maybe come from a later diagnosis if they're not getting the support like yourself. Is that what you're meaning by that question, Veronica? Like, I'm just wondering.
I was thinking about that is that I was thinking, I guess part of what Chris was saying earlier was that, part of self-development and that sense of self and how that develops for adolescents comes from the experiences they have, but the framework from which they might understand that from. And I just wondered at times if someone without a diagnosis early on who isn't feeling like they fit in may more negatively attribute that to themselves as opposed to understanding it's actually a valuable part of themselves. So it's probably just wondering whether that framework potentially gives a young person a better chance maybe to develop a healthier sense of self.
Or even adults, right? Don't you think? Like we're talking about young people, but even a later diagnosis in adulthood, and then how that then better helps them to understand themselves rather than having that negative dialogue or negative sense of self.
No, I think I know that I've seen myself, and I'm sure you two have as well. There's been a few, I think I meet a lot of middle-aged or younger women, I guess, that have had that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Maybe some diagnoses that aren't quite as relevant for them, or at least in their time of life now. And then you notice like, oh, okay, you're noticing, inattentive ADHD type stuff, or maybe some things that might be a little bit different, but they, don't get picked up on because they're very clever, really bright, or they've had lots of structure around their lives before. And then they get to, and this can happen to all of us, of course, big things happen in life. And then, yeah. So I think, Veronica, you're right. If we can be that neuroaffirming, reflective, and that does help hopefully create that sense of self and identity and acceptance of some of those parts of self. And it's all about, of course, the language we learn, we use, and keeping it consistent. And yeah.
I just figure it could be a reason and something maybe for GPs just to be that sense aware of that, maybe sometimes helping people get that earlier framework of reference could be helpful in that longer term development of a positive sense of self, which I think is what we all are wanting, isn't it? Is that really healthy developmental space for someone to move into. Can I completely change the topic now? Well, not completely. We're going to stay with neurodiversity. But I was curious and reflective of what Tanya was saying when she introduced you, because you certainly have a diversity of therapeutic approaches that you utilize, don't you? Would you be prepared to talk a little bit about some of the different approaches you utilize and why they might be preferred ones for working with neurodiverse clients?
Well, I think I'll start with being pretty blunt about why I like so many different things. And that's because I'm a bit very inattentive ADHD myself. So I have to sort of always be shifting my focus on different things. So I like to sort of grasp from different pools of things, or I get a bit bored actually. So that's one of the main reasons. But I also am very passionate about all those different areas as well. I see them as very helpful. So yes, schema is something I'm really passionate about, which is really hard to define on the spot. About what draws me to it is that it very much links in very strongly, I believe, with sort of identity and sense of self. So schemas are kind of like these conceptual parts of self that kind of develop in younger years and sometimes later on in adult years as well, that can be used to sort of externalize and separate people in a healthy way from their distress or other things they might be having difficulties with at different times in their life. And they kind of are these things that are really protective, really helpful in life, get them through really tough times. But they're not really needed later on in life, maybe, but they're still there. So they need to be sort of acknowledged and cared for in a way rather than challenged. Like, I'm not back there. I'm not like that now. Although that may be true, it may not feel like that.
Yeah, that's good. I also, you have recently trained, haven't you, in EMDR therapy as well? Do you use that with your neurodiverse clients as well?
I do. Sometimes it looks a little bit different. I suppose that would mainly be, and there's so many different profiles of ASD, right? Particularly when it comes to emotional experiences. So what you kind of use as a base for, because they need to be able to sort of connect to the memory, at least in some different kind of ways for EMDR to really work or for the processing to happen. So sometimes it might just be like a little bit different in what we kind of need to hold onto and work through.
Yep. Okay, that's really great because I've always wondered, because I agree with you. So EMDR stands for those that don't know, eye movement desensitization reduction, which is just a general technique that's utilized around trauma-based therapy primarily, but has been found to be particularly useful in that area of little t's. And so many of our mental health issues relate back to accumulation of these small amounts of trauma, don't they too? So I could imagine it is very useful for them, but maybe, as you're saying, a bit more challenging because they're having to connect introspectively, which can be more difficult.
Yes, it very much so. So sometimes it might be instead using drawings or different language of their experiences, or really fleshing out a bit more than with other people what is coming up for them, and how, whatever words come to them or however they feel it. As long as you just go with that, you can't really go too far wrong in my experience.
That's very good. Given that the purpose of this is around a resource for GPs, when do you think it is useful for GPs to refer a neurodiverse client to therapy? What sort of reasons might we do that?
I think very, very much in line with that, affirming to young people and anyone and everyone in that space that very much their experience of the world might be a little bit different to others. And even if it's just simply seeing a psych or a counselor or someone to kind of sit with them and help them really come to terms a bit about what that is or what that might be for them, because we're all different, no matter what, neurodiversity or not, but give them a space where they feel that they are, just simply, listened to, seen, and provided, I think, with my own sort of personal experiences as well, and my very much my passion in the area, just being a little bit clever with what pathways we can take around, well, obstacles really in life, and challenges, and how we can use our strengths as well to, get to where we want to be.
Yeah, so it's also just bringing out some of those positive attributes, and that's where therapy can be useful. It's just we don't have to wait for them to collapse, do we, or for them to be so distressed. It's often helpful for it to become a little bit proactive, just in shaping that how those experiences are internalized as they occur.
Yeah, and I think coming back to your beginning statement around helping them understand themselves, their identity, and doing that in an affirming way.
Chris, you obviously work across the lifespan as well. So, given that you work with young adolescents or young boys, actually, I see a lot of young boys come through your office. Actually, I think you've got a lot of young guys that certainly have connected with you in that age 8, 9, 10, really, isn't it? Like they're just kind of really wishing. But is there anything particular that you would like GPs to know about young adults or even late diagnoses of neurodiversity? Is there anything that you particularly want to share in that space?
I think my main takeaway for GPs would be that I've been quite blown away in a positive way how uplifting and encouraging it can be sometimes. Like even sometimes the language or labels and all of this is that it generally goes pretty well. So I suppose, not be too afraid of these things, but also it definitely doesn't define a person entirely by any means. It's more like just different ingredients of the person. But I think that I think coming back to something earlier I sort of talked about is that sometimes change is an interesting thing, where structure and routine and things staying the same very much a lot of the time give a sense of safety and stability for us neurodiverse people, especially, and that there will be times of supported change for even when you go and see a GP. Like that's a massive step.
Yeah.
And The research is all coming out. We live in a bit of a very much a changing world, and I see it as pretty bright actually in the neurodiverse space at the moment in many ways. So, yeah.
Chris, can I just say, I think I love where you started in terms of the question that we asked you about why did you become a psychologist in the first place? And I think what's so beautiful to watch is I think you have become the psychologist that was so useful for you, right? Is that the young people that like they genuinely, there's the one bit of feedback that I get consistently through any clients that we've kind of shared or parentally shared is just how valued the parents have found you in their young person's life, in terms of that you have given them a space to feel so accepted and room to grow, which is then allowing them to really develop the skills where they've gone and seen other psychologists and just didn't feel that same level of connection. So I do think you've probably become the person that that got you inspired in psychology as well.
I would like to think so. Thank you very much, Veronica. That's very, very kind of you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris. And it is nice, I think, and it's so I'll have to go back and watch the Good Will Hunting movie and come back to the reference. But that pretty much completes our time. So thank you so much for your time, Chris, and to everybody that's listening. Chris is accepting referrals at the moment. You can contact us at contact@mindwarepsychology.com.au or 46464953 is our phone number. And feel free to send those referrals through. You can address them to MindWare Psychology, specifically to Chris or to MindWare Psychology, particularly if you've got those neurodiverse or you're looking for young people who are adults who are looking for trauma therapy as well. So thank you so much for your time, Chris, and thank you, Veronica.
No worries. Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.